In the previous film, we discussed the fact that French scientists discovered that Spanish coins from the 16th and early 17th centuries, spanning from the reign of Charles V to Philip III, did not contain American metal. At the same time, the silver found in Roman denarii closely matches the isotopic composition of silver from Potosí, modern Bolivia. Potosí was the main silver mine of the New World and the whole world until the 18th century. This essentially suggests that while Spanish coins from the 16th and early 17th centuries lack American silver, it is curiously present in Roman coins. How is this possible when the Roman Empire ended 1,000 years before Europeans discovered America? I know that many of you, just like me, while studying history in school with the help of textbooks, had this not-so-childish question in mind. How could it happen that after the brilliant times of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, an era of rapid growth in technologies, sciences, and arts, humanity suddenly plunged into the dark Middle Ages? Without any reason or grounds, they remained there for 1,000 years. They stayed in one place and did not develop in almost any direction. The only exception, perhaps, was in the direction of their degradation. What force could stop technical progress for 1,000 years? Scientists don't have clear answers to these questions. They offer, to put it mildly, only verbiage. Throughout my life, interest in history has sometimes weakened, sometimes intensified. Especially in the early 2000s, when Russian academician, professor at Moscow State University Anatoly Fomenko and his co-author Gleb Nosovsky rocked the consciousness of ordinary people with their hypothesis that the modern version of the history of antiquity and the Middle Ages is lengthened by several centuries because it was written by ignorant medieval scholars. According to Fomenko and Nosovsky, Jesus was born not 2,000 years ago, but in the 12th century, and therefore, the era of the Middle Ages is shortened to, approximately, 3 centuries. At a quite mature age, I made the following assumptions and suggestions. What if there was no Middle Ages, at least because the technologies of the Middle Ages were no different from those of antiquity? And there was no antiquity in the modern understanding of this term either. And what is now called antiquity was an artificial transfer of names and events from the 15th and 16th centuries, the so-called Renaissance era, to the deep past. With such a reconstruction of our chronology, the Renaissance should not be referred to as an era of rebirth, but rather an era of birth. Birth of what? The birth of urban civilization, which came to replace rural culture in human cohabitation. Yes, indeed, before the first cities emerged, people lived in villages, meaning, they learned to lead a settled lifestyle. This rural culture, in turn, supplanted the nomadic and primitive communal mode of human societal survival, which was through hunting and gathering. The moment I visualized that antiquity and the Renaissance are one and the same era, I understood that historians from the 17th to 18th centuries, by order of church authorities, created 2 eras with an information vacuum in between. The Middle Ages. And when I realized this, I immediately found dozens, and then hundreds of facts from open sources suggesting that the history of Christianity had indeed been lengthened by 1,500 years. These sources include Google Books, which provides access to a wide range of literature and scholarly texts. Additionally, I used the digital library of ancient engravings from the Duke August Museum. It is worth noting that historians often classify images that do not accurately reflect their historical period, such as the depiction of Luke the Evangelist wearing 16th-century glasses, as anachronisms. Another valuable resource I utilize is the collection of antique maps curated by David Ramsey and similar websites. And of course, the texts from the Bible remain a significant source of information for me. I consider the texts from the Bible, collectively known as the Holy Scripture, to directly and indirectly challenge the commonly held belief that Christianity has been in existence for approximately 2,000 years. Even in Wikipedia, a mirror of official history, there is a lot of information that either poorly fits or doesn't fit at all with this official history. In the Russian version of Wikipedia about the Old Testament Church, the following is stated. By the way, information about the first church, the Old Testament one, is absent in other European languages, as if it never existed. The Old Testament Church is an ecclesiological term used in Christianity to denote a religious institution, the history of which is described in the Old Testament, as well as part of humanity that lived under the guidance of commandments and promises given by God to Moses. This is, albeit quite vague and veiled, but still an admission that before the New Testament church, there was the Old, First, or Ancient Church, founded on the law of Moses, the very 10 Commandments, and a whole list of criminal and administrative articles from Exodus, the second book of the Pentateuch of Moses. This 16th century engraving depicts that very Old Testament church in the form of the bride of Christ, to which Jesus Christ approaches with his new law, the New Testament. The transition from the Old Law to the New took place from the end of the 15th century until the Council of Trent in the mid-16th century. It was at this council where the practically modern Christian canon and symbol of Christian faith, the Holy Trinity, was formalized. This gives the council its name, the Tridentan or Trent Council. The name Trento, or supposedly the Council of Trent was held for some time, was assigned after the council. The phantom reflection of this council, historians put on paper as the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where the final separation of Christianity from Judaism was proclaimed, that is, what really happened at the Council of Trent, specifically the formalization of the transition from the First, later called Old Testament, to the New Testament church and canon. Perhaps one of the clearest and most visible proofs that the Old Testament church existed before the Christian church is found in the Bible. The word church, or ecclesia in Latin, is mentioned not only in the New Testament but also in the Old Testament many times, indicating that the church was in existence before Christianity was adopted. In the Revelation of John the Theologian, also known as the Apocalypse, the last book of the New Testament and the Bible, certain passages stand out. Here, Jesus addresses the 7 Old Testament pre-Christian churches of Asia Minor. Every self-respecting historian would be familiar with these words, "I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last." The text reads, "What you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches that are in Asia, modern Turkey, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea." However, when it comes to this period in the life of the churches, modern historical science seems hesitant. This is not only true for churches in Asia Minor but also those in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. These are often referred to as the Old Testament patriarchates. Specifically, these are the Roman, Constantinople, Alexandrian, Antioch, and Jerusalem patriarchates. They are also labeled as Patriarchatus Antiqa on a map by Guillaume Sanson, a French cartographer. Despite this historical record, current scholarship often behaves as if this Old Testament period in the history of the churches never existed. By the way, the borders of these 5 patriarchates almost perfectly coincide with the borders of the so-called Roman Empire. Historians often overlook the Old Testament themes on the tomb of Pope Julius II, which was created by Michelangelo. The ancient reflection of Pope Julius II is Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian Augustus. Notably, there's nothing specifically Christian or New Testament related on his tomb. Moses, the central Jewish prophet, holds the tablets of the covenant, which contain the 10 commandments from the Old Testament given by God on Mount Sinai. To the left and right of Moses are Leah and Rachel, who were mothers to 8 of the 12 sons of Israel, the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel. This leaves us with a question: was Pope Julius II a practitioner of Judaism? Yes, Pope Julius II, the most famous pope of the Renaissance era, was a monotheist Judaist and the head of the Old Testament Roman Church, or the Roman Patriarchate that was his canonical territory. Here, Germany is marked not as a state, but as a geographical area name. It only became Catholic, meaning it entered the Roman Patriarchate, in the early 16th century. However, this is a topic we'll discuss separately, not in this film. We will also separately examine what is here labeled as Russia, which according to all references did not exist in ancient pre-Christian times. Pope Julius II, of course, was not a Jew in either the ethnic or the caste sense of the word. He was a monotheistic Judaist. A Jew and a Judaist are not the same thing. Just like Christians, the followers of Jesus Christ, who was an ethnic Jew, are not considered Jews. However, at the same time, an ethnic Jew can be not only a Jew but also a Christian or even an atheist. The Old Testament Church was both the forerunner and foundation of the New Testament Church, as well as the transition from Catholic, that is, universal, Judaism in the 15th century to Catholic, also universal, Christianity in the 16th century, after the Council of Trent. But how does such a short story of the Church respond with radiocarbon dating, which confirms the age, for instance, of the so-called solar bark of Pharaoh to be around 4,500 years old, found in an underground storage area near the Pyramid of Khufu, along with the centuries-old age of other similar artifacts. Alas! The method of radiocarbon dating is not only imprecise, it's 100% subjective, that is, it depends on how the equipment is calibrated by lab technicians and also on their subjective interpretation of the test results. This, in principle, is impossible, for example, when working with a simple measuring tape, which, no matter who uses it, yields the same measurement results. What do we know about Roman coins, which, as we are aware, are incredibly ancient, dating back around 2,000 years or so? Let's go through Poland, which, as is known, was not part of the Roman Empire. However, a large number of Roman coins have been found on its territory in the form of treasures and individual finds. Moreover, the concentration of these finds coincides with the location of free German cities, references to which before the 14th century have an annalistic, that is, a legendary character. The historical paradox lies in the fact that in these free German cities, predominantly German-speaking, the main currency was not German coins, but the Roman denarius with the profiles of not Roman German emperors, but simply emperors. Nerva, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, Antoninus Pius, Severus Alexander, and other emperors. No, not of the Roman Empire, but emperors of the Roman Church, which until the Peace of Westphalia, until its defeat in the 30 Years' War, had its own army, the Roman legions. This painting from 1533 by German artist Melchior Fesselin depicts the Battle of Alesia involving Julius Caesar. Did Julius Caesar have cannons and rifles? Yes. Because in the mid-15th century, the lifetime of Gaius Julius Caesar, firearms were already in use. About Julius Caesar, who was not only an emperor, that is, a military leader, but also the great pontiff, the Pope of Rome, we will also talk separately. Yes, originally emperors were military leaders, commanders of Roman legions, with the right to not only military, but also civil authority over occupied territory, and also with the right to mint their own coins with their profile and their secular and ecclesiastical titles. Regarding the title emperor and other abbreviations and acronyms on Roman coins, we will discuss separately. In order not to overload this film with information about the connection between Roman coins, Latin America, the Roman Church and the Holy Inquisition, please refer to the next film for further exploration of this topic. For those who seek not only knowledge but also a deeper understanding of history and its cause and effect relationships, I present to you my book, The Other History of Roman Empire. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time and attention. I wish you all the best. Respectfully, Alexander Tomansky.